YouTube, how you doing? Chrono Knight back here with another video. And for today's video, we are going to be talking about the Chaos Galaxy ban list. Okay, so we're currently coming up on a new proposed ban list that is in the discussion, and so I figured I'll hit you guys with a video just kind of talking about what the current ban list is and some new cards that could potentially come on or off the ban list. And so I want to preface this video by saying this is a ban list discussion. That means it is a combination of a prediction and a wish list. So I want you guys to kind of just consider that as we go through everything. I'm going to the best of my ability, explain why I believe a card should be in a certain tier or category that I'm going to classify it in, but also kind of give my own justification and why I think it would be good and or bad um, for the game. And we want to propose things that are going to make the game, fun and enjoyable for everyone. And I think that's what's the beauty of a ban list. It adds something fresh and something new and puts us in a good spot to enjoy the game. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about how everything is broken down. So this top category is called full ban, which means these should not be played at any copies based on the ban list restriction. Half ban just means you can play one of two maximum copies. So you only can play one copy instead of the two max. And then no ban means that you can play it at two copies with no restriction, right? Okay, so just to kind of get that out the way. Now, the cards that you're currently seeing already on the tiers, this is what the current ban list looks like, right? So let's just kind of clear that up for a second. This is what the current ban list is. And I figured this would be a good way to show it as this is where we currently stand. And then when I start shifting things around and adding these new cards at the bottom, you'll kind of see what's going on. And so my approach to the video is to look at the current ban list first and to make some shuffles around with that. And then we'll talk about these cards at the bottom, which have been newly proposed cards based on some of our discussions in the Discord channel amongst various players. And people are just kind of expressing how they feel about certain cards. And I feel like they're worth being spoken about in our video today. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the full ban list. So starting off with Shockwave number 5. Okay. So for me, I believe Shockwave 5 should absolutely stay on the ban list as fully banned. The card says whenever your opponent plays a 5-star creature, you play this activator and they kill their entire hand. And honestly, I think that's just too much of a drawback for just playing a creature, right? And it also says play, right? So that means free play, cost play, things like that. So it's like you're just scared to run any 5-star creatures. And I don't think that's a fun aspect of the game where you think that like just because I play a certain card that I'm gonna just get my whole hand wiped. And it's something that if it is legal, people would just splash it in a deck. And with Jakra being one of the blue flame cards that has just been added in, um, that's a 5-star creature. So like that just automatically kills the deck, in my opinion. Getting your whole hand wipe is kind of hard to come back from. When drawing cards is already something that's like super niche and valuable within Chaos Galaxy right now. There's not too many cards that just let you just draw, right? So losing your whole hand can really hurt. So not too much on Shockwave 5. I think it should stay right here. Next is Slush Infestation. You play that card as a permanent resource into any person's zone, and they can't play any cards in that zone. And personally, I just don't think that's a fun way to really approach the game. Doesn't really feel like too much skill is involved. And the only way that it could be removed is if you're really running a lot of permanent resource removal and if you play another Slush Infestation of your own. So then that kind of encourages like a somewhat toxic format where like everyone's just throwing around Slush Infestation. And then even if you build a deck where you have some permanent resource removal, you're kind of crippled against the new decks that are running good permanent resources. So like you're burning those removals on this type of card when it could be used for something more valuable. So I think it should stay banned. Parallel Universe, which says when you play this card, you switch planets, hands, zones, killed cards, and decks. And every turn you switch back. And this is just a headache to keep up with. But particularly in the untapped format online, it's just like not even possible to execute that the way that the program is designed in the software. So I think this should just stay banned for obvious reasons. Dark Space Eater. Dark Space Eater says that if you play a card, I'm sorry, you kill a card from your deck face down, and then whenever your opponent plays that card, they must kill that card and every other copy of that card in their deck, right? So once again, like kind of similar to the Shockwave 5 thing, I just feel like it's in Slush Infestation. I feel like it's just encouraging the wrong type of gameplay. Where it's like, okay, I play this card because I know you run, I don't know, AAA, for example, and I just want to kill all your AAAs, and then you have no defense against my activators. And I just don't think that's a good way to play. Next is Cosmic Treasure. Cosmic Treasure says, if I'm not mistaken, if you have less cards, less handed cards, and I think less zone cards as well, then you get to draw two cards. Um, And in the current format, I feel like that could be useful, but the problem with a card such as this is that it's so generic that everyone just ends up running it, right? And then now you kind of have a situation where we're just taking up a deck slot, and you feel like you have to run this card because it's so good that if you don't run it, you're just going to be at a disadvantage. And it's like, it's better to just keep it banned than to try to navigate a format of having it out. And it was on the ban list for a reason, so I think it's okay to keep it there. Last but not least is Bernard the Space Worm. Bernard the Space Worm says, when this card is zoned, neither player can play an activator card. Um, and now for me, I actually think that Bernard can move to half band. The reason I say this is because the stats aren't too incredible. I believe it's 150 power, 250 health. So that means it's not really hard to clear. Um, it just requires, your opponent to play a little bit of a higher creature, which a lot of decks are doing pretty fine right now. And then based on our discussions of these other activators, there would be less targets for that anyway. And then it's a no planet card. So then you kind of sacrifice the consistency of some of your own engine and your own strategy just to run this card that stops an activator. And I think we're in an okay format where that's not a problem. And that in tandem with another card that I'll discuss down here will justify that it's okay to come off the ban list. I'm sorry, another card down here. All right, next we're going to talk about Combine Harvester. I think Combine Harvester is okay to come off as no ban. Um, it basically says when you play this card, you can sacrifice it to play a combiner directly from your graveyard. In previous formats, this used to be really strong when the power level of Gehenna, for example, was just really high because other decks didn't have consistent ways to deal with it without getting constantly out resourced. But I think a lot of the decks are a lot more fast paced. And I think it'll be really interesting to see a lot of the combiner strategies in general come back and try to compete with some of these monoplanet and even multi-planet strategies. So I think it's okay to have Combine Harvester at two copies. Next is Pelfam. I think Pelfam is at a perfectly good spot right now. I think it's a sweet spot where it's a really strong card, is very high impact, but keeping it at one makes it very, very valuable. Um, and it's something that, yes, you can splash in a lot of decks, but with it being 7 stars, it puts a player in a position where they have to play Pelfam wisely, or they could get punished, and things like that. So I think it's like a really good balance right now for how Pelfam is being used. Leave a comment in the description below if you feel otherwise. But I think Pelfam is actually in an okay spot to just be at one copy still. Next, we're going to talk about Skelligas. Skelligas, I believe, can come to two copies. Um, the Sindel planet right now is kind of getting power crept in some ways, and it's kind of getting outclassed. And what I think having gas back to two will do is will give it a little bit of a momentum shift and allow it to kind of go back into that tempo aggro strategy where you can effectively hit people with 3 creature boards. And I think it's one of the best decks to do that. Um, but what Skelligas can offer right now, just because of what the Sindel planet itself has to offer, I think it's okay to have Skelligas at 2 copies right now. Next up, Galaxy Crash. Okay, Galaxy Crash, I think, similar to Pelfam, is in a good spot. It's really, really powerful. Yes, you could play it in a bunch of decks, but I think anything more than 2 just like really takes it over the top, and becomes a situation similar to like the Cosmic Treasure where everyone's just gonna splash around 2 copies of Galaxy Crash and just keep blowing up the board. What I like about it now at one is that if for okay, let's put yourself in my shoes, for example. If I'm playing my opponent and I'm punishing them by using the field properly and gaining advantage and really shifting the momentum. Chaos Galaxy is a very momentum based type of game, and if I'm playing well, I'm controlling the momentum. And if they're so overwhelmed that they have to clear my board really early with Galaxy Crash, then I'm able to recover that board. I think there's a lot of skill elements involved with that. But just giving your opponent an auto just destroy everything, you kind of want to be careful with that. So I think one copy is fine. Next up, we're going to talk about spoons. Spoons is an interesting pick. Some people brought this up in our Discord, and I think spoons is actually in a good spot right now as well. Um, yes, it can be splashed into a lot of decks as well, but I think the restrictions of spoons puts a player in a position where they don't want to just play spoons just to play spoons. They want to make sure that it does kind of have some synergy with their deck. Um, I was doing some testing and playing around with the idea of double Skelligas, and then I had spoons in hand. And for about 2 or 3 turns, I was sitting there like, wow, I actually don't want to have spoons right now because it conflicts with my Skelligas combo. If I'm playing a deck that really wants to like aggro out, multiple creatures or like use multiple abilities of creatures in one turn, that really conflicts with spoons, right? So I think it's in a spot where it's useful, it's powerful, but every deck doesn't just have to run it. So I'll leave it at one. Next is for Cell Sign. Same thing. I think for Cell Sign, can just stay at one. I think it's a very skill based card. You pay stars to take control of your opponent's creature. On their turn, they could pay stars to take it back, and you kind of do like a bouncing back and forth type of situation. But it does still require some skill in the form of resource management. And having it at one, I think is pretty cool because you can splash it into your deck, but you don't have to worry about people running around with 2 copies of it. And if you're skilled, you can play around it even if your opponent has one and you don't. Next up is Phantom Matter. I'm actually going to propose that Phantom Matter be banned. Um, and I don't know if this is just a matter of wanting to see the format a little bit refreshed, but I mean, Phantom Matter is probably in 100% of decks right now. Like, I would really argue that um, everyone is running Phantom Matter. It's at 1 copy, and if it was at 2, it'd be even worse. But the card just says you steal opponents one of their kill creatures and bring it to your side of the field. Um, and I think it's just like you don't even think about it. Like you draw it, and 9 times out of 10, you want to just play it the turn you draw it. But I would love to see what the format looks like if it's not there. And then once things kind of level out, maybe we bring it back. But that's just my take, and this might be a wish list pick for me. Next is Jetpack. I think Jetpack is okay to stay at 1 copy. My thought process for that is because at 2 copies, I think it can become too splashable. You have a situation where people would just run, multiple creatures that cost the same amount, and then now you're just like constantly getting creatures back and forth. Um, and it could be a little toxic. I would love to hear people's takes on Jetpack. Um, but because of the other changes I'm going to propose, I think Jetpack at one is fine. Beast of the Black Hole and Planetary Field, I think they're just really strong activators that can stay at 1 copy. Similar to Galaxy Crash, you clear your opponent attacking you, and this is a good defensive activator, both when you have creatures and when you don't have creatures, and I think that's just valuable. Not too much to say about those two. Now, for Point Turret, I'm actually going to propose that we ban Point Turret. And my thought process is, like I said before, Chaos Galaxy is a very, excuse me, momentum based game, right? So if I'm playing well, I have a really good, strong control of the momentum, right? Whether that's hand advantage or resource advantage, or I have more points and things of that nature. And this kind of gives my opponent an auto bailout if I'm swinging and putting a lot of pressure on them. And if the game is like close enough in points, this could give them an auto win condition if I don't have a AAA to answer it. And I just really don't like that style of play where it's like, okay, I've been playing really well. My opponent might have came back and got a few points. And then now they can just sit there with turret in their hand and I can never attack because if I attack, I auto lose. And so I would love to see what the format looks like with Turret Band, similar to Phantom Matter, where it's just like an easy throwdown card, and try to see what things look like after that. Okay, now going on to Leviathan's Crown. This is for the Pelisium planet. Um, it protects your Pelisium creatures that are 7-star or 8-star from abilities that will remove it from the planet. And I think this is really cool, and this would be a really good way to uh, balance out what Pelisium could look like versus the current meta, and I'll put it in no ban and have it at 2 copies. I think this would give a nice buff to the Pelisium planet, and I think the ultimate goal, and I think people watching this can agree, is that we want planet diversity, right? We don't want it to just be one or two planets or deck archetypes that are just running the whole show, and everything else. Like if I pick it, I can't win with it, you know. Ideally, we want a lot of planet representation, and I think this would be a step in the right direction for that. To protect against things like Chakra or Scorn or for Cell Sign, there's a lot of different targets, and it just gives Pally a little bit of insulation because they're already risking a lot by spending stars on big creatures. Okay, so that's it for the current ban list. Now we're going to jump into some of these newly proposed cards. All right, so starting off with Activation Activated Activator, also known as AAA. I'm going to propose that AAA stays at 2 copies. Some people have been talking about a potential half ban of AAA, but I think it's okay to have at two because we're going to get rid of Turret, right? If we get rid of Turret and we just have AAA, okay, a person might dedicate one AAA to Beast, maybe one AAA to Field, or they might use AAA against another thing. Like if I'm playing against Pally, maybe I save it for Leviathan's Crown, or if I'm going against Shias, maybe I save it for their Firewall, or if I'm going against Gaios, I save it for their Temple Traps. I think having it at two kind of adds a little bit of a skill element and doesn't put us in a situation where now Beast becomes similar to Turret, where they don't have a AAA, they're just going to auto get destroyed by that. And I know it does come down to being an experienced player and just playing well in general. But I think we can hit other things and maybe worry about AAA later. Okay. All right. So going over to Darkspark, some conversations have been talking about whether Darkspark needs to be banned or half banned. I'm going to propose that it stays right where it is. The reason being is I think Darkspark has a very level drawback, if that makes sense, right? So, yes, it's 6 stars. When I play it, I'm going to mill 4 cards and I'm going to gain 4 stars. So, in math terms, Darkspark only costs 2 stars and is very powerful. Yes, but in some decks, milling 4 cards of your deck can hurt you more than other decks, right? Like if I'm playing a pure Sindel deck and I have Darkspark, I'm almost happy to mill all 4 cards pretty much at any time. But if I'm just grabbing Darkspark just to have it in any of my other decks, like let's say Gaios Mind Control, for example, um, milling 4 cards is not a good idea because that deck relies a lot on 2 card combos, and I could like break my own combos just by milling. So I think Darkspark, yes, it is kind of splashable because it does have some generic benefits, but I think it has some drawbacks where it's not like too toxic or too overpowered to me. And I'll say the same thing for Beast of the Conjurers as well. Yes, you can play Beast of the Conjurers in pretty much any deck because you're going to gain zones. What I like about it though is that experienced players know how to play around Beast of the Conjurers. So yes, when my opponent plays this card, they're going to gain one zone. To prevent them from gaining another zone, I can look to remove dog without attacking into it, right? I can shuffle it, I can bounce it back to hand, or I can remove it with a creature ability instead of attacking, things like that. So it does require some skill. And it being 6 stars does put a player in a position where they have to manage their resources properly. Okay, now for these next, I'm actually going to put all three of these together. And this is going to be a difficult thing to discuss. I'm actually going to put them all there first and then talk about it. So now the new Shape Knights are coming on the scene and they're doing really well in the tournament. Actually, the current grand finals is a Shape Knight mirror match. So obviously they've been performing very well. And a lot of people have been discussing what do we need to do to Shape Knights to tone them down a little bit, excuse me, and to bring them down so that they're not like too oppressive and just taking over everything, you know? And so I've explored the options of like limiting either some combination of two of these or banning one of them. Um, for me, I think what makes the deck so powerful is a combination of the connection to Lionel, Lionel free playing every turn, and Hexator getting to free play off of every Shape Knight. And that synergy alone is allowing Shape Knights to consistently hit you for about 4 points, almost on each turn, or like every other turn if they, especially if they draw pretty well. And so you're dealing with that dynamic, and then even the new cards that are not new cards, but the supporting cards around them are just making that part of the strategy more and more consistent. And so for Shape Knights, they're running things like the United card, which says kill one card from your galaxy to return, kill one night card from your galaxy to return one night card from the grave to your hand. And so what people would do is just kill their second copy of Lionel, get Hexator back to hand. They already have their first Lionel free playing, and now they have another 5 points, a 4 point swing at their disposal. And so I think a way to kind of mitigate that is some combination of limiting or banning one of these cards. And here's my justification. So I think if you limit Hexator, either limit or ban Hex. I think banning might be a little too harsh because we're just getting started, and I think that would kill the archetype. But if you ban Hexator, when a person plays Triangle, if they already have that one copy of Hexator in their hand, now they have to decide between do I kill my other triangle or kill my other square, right? And both of those cards are fairly impactful for the consistency of the deck. And I think that makes the Shape Knight player have to make a little bit more of a niche decision, which in turn should kind of balance things out. Similarly to having Lionel at one copy, if you only have to worry about um, playing around one Lionel, things like Galdor's Box becomes a little bit more impactful. And even the reason I didn't side Galdor's Box during this current tournament is because I felt like, okay, it's very rare that they have both Lionels killed. And then, okay, if I get one Lionel trapped in the Galdor's Box, then they're just going to play the other one and they can search it with Triangle. And it just took away the effectiveness. But if a person has only one Lionel, they have to play around it a little bit more strategically, and it also puts a little bit more pressure on having to draw into Triangle to get their combo started, which in turn should kind of balance things out. So that's just my thought process on what the Shape Knights are looking like right now. I think the Arena permanent resource is fine. It does benefit the planet, but it doesn't feel overpowered, and I think that's okay. All right. Which leads me to believe I think I missed out on adding the tower to the tier list from the Blue Flames. But that's okay. We'll talk about that now. All right, moving on. Sorry. All right, here we oh, so next we're gonna talk about Laji. And I think if we ban, not ban, but half ban Laji, I think that will put Blue Flames in a very interesting position. Right now, the problem with that particular combo is that people are um, having one of the Blue Flames killed. They cosplay the other one, right? So you have Laji standing next to Jacra, and you have the permanent resource. Jacra is going to shuffle the permanent resource back into the grave to shuffle one of my opponent's creatures away. And then I'm going to attack them in the face for 6 points and then use Laji to search the permanent resource just to do it all over again. And I think that looping aspect is not really what this game is designed for. Like I said, if it's momentum based, that's just generating too much momentum packaged into 3 cards. And when you run multiple copies of it, now you're just adding consistency to it. And so cutting Laji to 1, and I would also put next to this cutting the Undying Blue Flame permanent resource, maybe cutting that to 1 as well, where the combo isn't completely dead, but it puts the Blue Flame player in a position where they have to make a decision about how do I want to use my tower? What do I really want to search with Laji? Or if I drew into 1, maybe I don't have any targets to search at all. And I think that kind of balances it out without killing the deck completely. So I would say Laji to 1 and Tower to 1. Next for Shiozi and Lava Mole, I would actually like to see what the format looks like with Mole at one copy. Sorry, I almost put it in the wrong spot. Yeah, I want to see what it looks like at one copy. Right now, a lot of decks were just splashing, especially in the previous format, before the Shape Knights and before the Blue Flames. Decks were just splashing in Lava Mole because they knew it would kill two activators, right? And so when people were running Field Beast Turret and double AAA, there's like, okay, I have a 1 in 5 chance, or actually 2 out of 5, because it was two copies, 2 out of 5 chances of just killing an activator directly from a hand and making it non-impactful. And I think making your opponent go -1 like that, but having it so splashable and generic in almost any deck because it's only cost 4 stars and the effect just happens whenever you kill a creature, is not the direction that I think we really want to go as far as having a healthy meta. So I would like to see what it looks like at one copy. Now, at one copy, yes, it can still be impactful for decks that like to have like more of an aggressive strategy, or if they really are concerned with activators being so oppressive to their deck. But this puts them in a position where they have to draw into that one copy, right? Or build their deck around getting to Mole. And that balances it out because they're sacrificing some of their own strategy and consistency just to get the benefits of this one card. Okay, next we're going to talk about Octorius. Okay, Octorius. I believe Octorius is perfectly fine where it is. Um, I was a little afraid of this card when it first came out because when you play it, uh, yes, it starts off at 1 star, but it gains stars for every killed Shape Knight creature, and then it gains stars from the permanent resource. And then if you use things like Cloud Cells with it as well, then it can go up to like 10 or maybe even 12 stars, I believe. Yeah, 12 stars with the permanent resource added on top of that. And at each turn, you get to gain stars based on how many stars Octorius has. So if I make it a 12-star creature, I play it and I get to get 12 stars and benefit right back. And not to mention the power level, right? So it could get over 1,000 power. Um, I don't I don't know. When I was watching it in the tournament, it didn't seem like there were a lot of instances where this was really just hitting people for a lot of damage. The most I would do to it is a half ban, and even that I don't think is necessary, especially if we talk about limiting one or maybe more of the Shape Knights in general, right? That lowers the power level of this and the consistency of how strong it can get. And so keeping it at 2, I think, is perfectly fine. I think you want to hit the other aspect, the synergy of the Shape Knights more so than the boss monster. Okay, next up was Soul Shroom. Now, if you asked me about Soul Shroom in the previous format, I would say like ban it, like full, like get rid of that card. And that was just because I was salty about the APC deck. But what I would say is that Soul Shroom is it's actually okay at 2 right now. Um, the reason is that because a lot of these mono planet strategies, meaning singular planets using pure amounts of that type of planet, right? So if I have a Sindel deck using all Sindel creatures, these types of decks are becoming stronger. Um, and so it's kind of checking shows from indirectly, right? Because when you play a Soul Shroom deck, you kind of sacrifice some of the synergy of the creatures just to be able to like get the free play aspect. And I think that balances out now that the planets are starting to get their own strengths. Like Syndian is more viable, Shias is more viable. Sindel and Pally could get some buffs with these changes. So just something to think about. As for Kaleidoscope Warriors, I actually propose that Kaleidoscope Warriors gets a full ban. Um, I would like to see what the format looks like with it banned. The reason I don't like it is because at high level gameplay, giving your opponent your whole hand knowledge, even if you don't have a card to discard, you have to show them your whole hand. And I just think that that could be very crippling, especially when you're going against a skilled player, right? So um, the ability says when it attacks. So it doesn't even have to kill a creature like Mole does. Mole at least has to kill a creature. Warriors is like whenever it attacks, it gets to look at your hand. And if you have an attachment card, it could kill that attachment immediately. And so earlier on in the game, because it's only 3 stars, if you ever pass on an empty board, your opponent could just be like, okay, let's play Warriors. Let's take a look at your hand. Even if you don't have an attachment, if you do have an attachment, you go -1. If you don't have an attachment, now I see exactly your whole strategy earlier on in the game, and then I can play the rest of the game kind of navigating what you're doing. And I kind of would see this in tournaments too, like people with screenshot hands and things like that. And yes, I mean, I know that is part of the game, and like that's, it is what it is. But I think that's kind of like not the direction that we're trying to go in making a healthy format. So I would say full ban Warriors. Next up is Super Flooper. I would propose that Super Flooper goes to one copy. My idea for this is that we want to boost the power level of Gaios a little bit. And the problem with Gaios, especially in tournament play, is that people would just side two copies of Super Flooper because the ability says kill any Gaios creature to free play this card. And so it's a strong creature with 400 power and 200 health, 280 health, sorry. And whenever I draw it, I'm like, okay, whenever they play a Gaius creature, and if I'm going against a Gaius opponent, how many Gaius creatures are they going to have? Like a lot, right? So whenever I see an opportunity to just like plop this down, not only am I going to kill one of their cards, I'm going to get a creature of my own and hit them for high damage. And people just being able to side two copies of this has been really oppressive to Gaios players. And I don't consider myself a Gaios player at all, but those that I know are really fond of the Gaios strategy have been kind of like a little upset that they feel like they're going to just auto lose whenever they play against Super Flooper. Now, putting it at one copy means that you only have to deal with one of those interactions, and it takes away a lot of the consistency. Um, and it also puts people in positions where they have to kind of shift their sideboard a little bit. Um, the other option for Super Flooper was full ban, and I thought that was a little too harsh because the Gaia's planet itself kind of wants to use Flooper, especially when they aren't facing someone who's using it as a sideboard card. Um, but some combination of either banning it or half banning it. I propose half banning it. I think will be beneficial. Last but not least is Upside Down Realm, which I'm going to say we do a full ban on. Upside Down Realm was being splashed into OTK decks. I'm personally not a fan of OTK strategies at all. I think they're not healthy for trading card games. Yes, they exist, but if they're going to exist, I think they really need a lot of restrictions. And I think the deck, yes, it did have some restrictions, but the deck was built around to the point where it became a little too consistent and it was kind of scary in my opinion. Like you built the deck around drawing into your cards until the point where you get Calamask plus the gauntlet attachment and an upside down realm and another creature, yes, that's like a 4 card combo. But if you build your deck around making that 4 card combo strong and consistent, then and if you know that once it goes through, you're gonna auto win, I just think that doesn't encourage like really fun gameplay. Um, and so yeah, if you kill upside down realm, you just kill that strategy completely, and it puts us in a position where we got to be a little bit more creative. But yeah, I think I've been rambling quite a bit. Please comment below if I missed any cards or if you feel differently about the way I placed any of these cards. For those of you watching that are in our Discord channel, I might put together a graphic kind of demonstrating what this will look like in our ban list graphic that we have in our Discord. But for those watching on YouTube, hope you guys jump into some Chaos Galaxy. It's a very fun game. And yeah, this is Chrono Knight from Chaos Galaxy signing out.